All right, I wanted to make a recording of our Tech Project 8, kind of a walkthrough. This one can be a little tricky if you don't have access to the full batch of tutorials that we use for this assignment. And as you know, as you saw in the assignment, Pixel Squid is gone, dead and gone. They got bought out and canned. So I'm going to try to give you everything you need to do this assignment that normally would have been in those tutorials. So bear with me. Let's see how this goes. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll just take a look at what's going on here with some of these files, because that's the first thing. So this is the assignment we're talking about, Tech Project 8. It's the one where you're going to put a ladybug from a separate file on top of this mushroom in another JPEG image. Okay, so all the files are here. You're going to download this stuff. And then what you're going to end up with is you're going to come over into Photoshop. And there's the PSD file that you download. It's just this 3D object. This is, well, okay, so let me clarify. This is not a 3D object. This is a two-dimensional render of a 3D object. So this ladybug was designed in 3D software and then rendered. So rendering means it converts it into just a bunch of pixels, right? It turns it into a JPEG in this case, or a PSD, I should say in this case. If you look at my layers panel, though, you can see there's a lot here other than just a simple pixel layer. So I just dragged and dropped that over here into my image, and then I opened up the PSD because it's a smart object. So this is what it actually looks like. Is I've got my background layer here, and I've got the ladybug smart object because it's Photoshop and it handles smart objects. When I double click on the smart object icon, which you guys know from your other tech project, it's going to open up that smart object. And any changes that we make in here inside of this layer stack, they're going to propagate back to the main um, PSD, which it's still a JPEG, but it'll be a PSD in a minute. All right, just to show you kind of where we're going to go with this, I did another one previously, and this one has all the effects and everything to blend it in, and I also added on a little extra on top of there, because when Pixel Squid was alive and well, we could grab all kinds of 3D objects and just drop them in there really easily. But uh, anyway, you don't have to do the missile launcher. But here's just an example of it kind of being finished. All right, so let me go ahead and just close some of these other files that I don't need for right now. I did another one here. This was an in-class demo that we did. This is our classroom. And I took a selfie at the front of the room, and then we put this robot in there and then colored it to match the room and then turned it maroon because it's ASU, kind of. Anyway, let's go ahead and close that. And then another one that I did here in class, this is a stormtrooper where we added all the lighting and everything. So the stormtrooper is a 3D object that we could rotate and spin and place in whatever position we wanted to using the web browser or the Pixel Squid tool. And then when we bring it into Photoshop, it comes in with all of these layers that we can then use to manipulate the lighting and effects and depth and focus and noise and all kinds of color things. And as you know, stormtroopers are usually white, and we colored this one red and did a bunch of other stuff to it to make it actually match the lighting in this scene. Okay, so we'll close that too and just focus on what we can do with this image. All right, so again, to reiterate, the reason that we're talking about this workflow, there's a few different components of it. One is that being able to take 3D content into Photoshop is a natural progression. For anybody who's doing anything with 3D, bringing it into Photoshop is where you finish things. A render of this ladybug is going to look like just what you see in that white box on the screen. It's not going to do any good. For compositing, you'd have to still remove the white background. You'd have to still adjust the lighting and the colors and everything to make it match that scene and do the Photoshop compositing. So what we do here is we take the render that's finished from 3D programs, used to be accessible via Pixel Squid. Nowadays, if you wanted to do the same kind of workflow, you'd need to just render the 3D object yourself using Cinema 4D or Maya or Blender or something else. And in your render settings, your export settings, you're going to choose what's called AOVs or beauty passes or render passes. And what those render passes are is it takes information from the 3D object, things that your 3D software can do, and it puts that into layers that Photoshop can see. So in your 3D software, there are parts to your 3D object, right? So it's really easy for that 3D software to render out a layer that just brightly colors those individual parts, and it makes selections really easy. So I can use something like the magic wand. I got to change my tool switching settings here. So the magic wand, and then it's really easy to select the color. I got to click on the right layer. So if I want to select the belly of this ladybug, it's really easy to just pick a color, shift click. I can add more sections. If I want to grab the green back there, I can. If I want to grab the red there, I can. It's really, really easy to make very accurate selections because the software rendered it. We don't have to do any of that work. We've got materials. So the 3D software also works with materials. And so in this case, this object is mostly all one material except for the eyes there. Other more complex objects have lots of different materials. And so if you want to select wood grain on an object separate from aluminum on an object, the 3D software knows what those are and can render out layers that give you these select by part layers. Okay, so I'm going to close that up. Those are just helpful. We may come back and use some of those for sure later on. All right, we've got subject layers below that, and there's a mask on it. There's a curves layer. The curves layer is there for a reason and is put in by the software, so don't mess with that one too much. If you want to adjust brightness and stuff, add a separate curves layer. Okay, but that curves layer is going to apply to everything underneath, and we've got shine. And I'm going to turn these on one at a time so you see what they are. So shine, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot there. We got to turn the curves layer on for it to be visible. But as you can see, we have just a tiny little bit of, there's some spots in there where there's some shine, and it means just what it says. If an object is shiny, it's going to have a shine layer. If you have an object that is not shiny at all, you won't see anything here. So this ladybug has some shiny parts. So things that are reflecting in it or shining on it are going to leave an effect. Now, if we wanted to change the appearance of this ladybug to look like it was, if there was a red light shining on it, for example, we wouldn't want white reflections to be there. So we would want to find some way to go ahead and add red reflections there. And the way we do that is with adjustment layers. So I can do like a hue saturation adjustment layer. I don't want to turn everything red. I just want to add red shine to it. So I'm going to clip this to that layer. And then I might do like a colorize. Let's switch this over to change it to be more red. I'm going to bring the saturation way up. And let's bring the lightness up. Whoa, too much. Don't want to do that. Let's try again. Lots of saturation. Okay, and so now those shiny bits, it's probably a little hard to see, are red. There's not that much shine on this particular object, but we're getting an effect where we're seeing some shine. We could add more and more things to this so that we see more of that shine. Like, for example, I want to just brighten this up. Let's go ahead and just add curves. And it's clipped by default. So I'm going to go into the curves and I want to change this to be, what do I want to do with this thing? Oh, okay. Hang on. What are we doing? There we go. We can brighten that up so we see more of that effect. We can darken it down so we see less, whatever you want to do. We have options here to make that shine more prominent and so on. So let me go back, zoom out. And with our smart object, I'm just going to go ahead and turn everything back on so we see it all together. You see there is a little bit of shine there, but it didn't change any of the colors. It didn't change the regular lighting on this because those are separate layers. It didn't add reflections. This is just, if there was a light pointing at this thing, like there was in the 3D software, we can change the color of that by just adding some effects in the middle of that stack, clipped to the shine layer. All right, so if I go back to my main document here, this still doesn't look right, obviously. So there's a couple of things we need to fix. One is let's just turn off the background, which I did here. So the background is on or off. And I need to hit save. So I'm going to hit Control S on a PC, Command S on a Mac. It saves that. And then we go back over here. And now those changes did take effect. So there's the red shine that we added. Now that obviously doesn't match with this scene, but we're getting there. Okay. Now, because it's going to bother me if I don't do it now, I'm going to go ahead and just add a mask on that. So let me go ahead and add a layer mask. I'll grab my brush tool and I'm going to clean this up later. But just for starters, I just want to hide some of the stuff that would be behind the top of that mushroom. if that ladybug were actually there. And I'm not going for realism right now. This is just mentally so that it doesn't bug me to have those legs sitting in front of it. So now it looks kind of like it's in the right spot, right? Okay, but it definitely doesn't match the scene. And my demo here, I'm not going to try and make it match the scene. I'm just going to show you what you can do with that smart object, and then you're going to go ahead and try to match the scene. All right, so anyway, that's what the shine layer does. Let's look at reflection now. So I'm going to turn that one on all by itself and turn my curves back on. Okay, so that's what the reflections are. So now if we have reflections in this scene, what do they look like? Well, we kind of need to see what the forest picture looks like so that we can better understand what reflections there would be in it. In the 3D software, it's designed in this infinitely clean white empty space. And so you see the reflections are all like just clean white reflections. That's not really what a forest would look like. You know, your mileage will vary how you decide to play with this, but the underside of it wouldn't be white, clean reflections. It would be definitely reflections of the mushroom, or if there was any light bouncing up off the mushroom, they would be on the underside here. So to make this easier mentally, I'm going to arrange my workspace a little bit and just say tile all vertically. You can do this however you want. But now this lets me put both documents on my screen. And I'm just going to drag this guy over here, center it, maybe zoom in a little bit. Maybe not that much. Okay, and this will let me see the effect of what I do on both documents at the same time. So in my reflection layer, let's go ahead and I'm just going to hide parts of the reflection. This will be really simple. Let me just put a mask on there. I'm just going to hide parts of the reflection. Oop, not like that. Yeah, like that. What am I talking about? I just don't want any reflections to be coming out from the bottom of here. And this looks really weird and it's going to be bad because I'm, again, not trying to make it look good. I'm trying to just demo concepts, hopefully, for you. All right, let me turn the rest back on so it's not so weird looking. So I don't know if you can see really well. There's still stuff underneath that, right? Let me go ahead and make a little less aggressive change there. I'm going to do, I'll brush that reflection back in. All right, now if I just gradually reduce the amount of reflection in there, we'll see less of that underneath, right? So I'm not going to fully mask it out. Let's just partially mask it out with maybe a light gray. Okay, so I'm just dimming the reflection on the underside here because there wouldn't be that much reflected light coming off of the mushroom that's covered by the ladybug. So it would be probably pretty dark on the underside of it, right? So I go through there and do some of that. I can keep building on that, adding more and more. I could also adjust the color a little bit in the reflection. So I want to do that overall globally. So I'm just going to add another adjustment layer. Let's do, I just like curves. So I'm going to add another curves and again, make sure that we clip it. Right. And I want to add a little bit of what we see over here with this yellow. There's not really any pure whites in this image, right? It's really warm toned, but the pure white reflections underneath it don't really match. And same thing on top. Like that's not the lighting that's in the scene. So I just want to shift the reflection overall to be a little warmer. Okay, so I'm going to go into my color channels here, and you guys have some experience with adjusting these color channels, right? In curves. I'm going to go into the green, and if I take out green, it's going to make it more magenta. If I add red, it's going to add red or make it more cyan if we take it out, and blue. If we take out blue, it's going to make it more yellow. So that's kind of where I want to go. I want to go a little more yellow. I want to go extreme so it's more obvious. It's going to look kind of sickly. Do you see that yellow showing up in there? I want to be more of a warm orangey. So now I need to go back into my red. Let's just add a little bit of red into that too. Right. And then I'll hit save. And now over here in this image, you see how my reflections are not white, pure white anymore. They're more orangey, And so again, try to match it best to the image as you can. One thing, I'm jumping around here, I know, but I see something that bugs me, and then I'm going to talk about it real quick. So over here, this 3D render of the ladybug is so crisp and sharp and contrasty. And then the image of the mushroom if we look, is just noise. Like it's so grainy and low resolution and soft and low contrast that that's throwing me off a little bit. And so it's for me in my head, I think it's going to be easier to visualize the effect of my color and contrast and lighting changes if I have the same noise over the top of that. So I'm clicked into this image on the left now, and so my layer panel on the right, it's not for the smart object anymore, it's for the main PSD. So let me go ahead and make some changes in here. I'm going to go onto this ladybug and I'm going to add a solid color layer. There's a lot of ways to add grain. That's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go into my solid color layer and I'm going to add a layer that's 128, 128, 128. That's pure gray, right? On a pure gray layer, if we were to say change its blend mode to a lot of other blend modes, what it's going to do is it's going to show things that are lighter or darker than that. And if I keep going through these, we're going to hit one of these called overlay, where it makes that gray layer transparent because it's looking at things that are lighter or darker than middle gray, which is 128 RGB. Anyway, that's beside the point. Point is, it's invisible because it's all the exact middle of where that blend mode, the overlay blend mode is. So it's just invisible. What I want to do is use that to add noise and grain onto the ladybug. So first off, I'm going to clip it to the underlying layer. We'll just alt click right there in the between, or we can right click on it and make a clipping mask. But now this layer, we don't see anything right now at all, but this color fill layer, this is going to be my noise layer. So let's name it noise. All right, and then on that noise layer, I'm going to go to my filters and I'll use a noise. There we go. Noise. And let's do, we can rasterize it. That's fine. All right, so let's take a look here. And do you see the effect over there on the ladybug? Make it monochromatic. We can add noise. And I don't like the effect so far, but again, this is just quick. All right, looks terrible, but I'm going to go with it right now just because this is a quick demo. But think of adding some noise to your image. And, maybe we want to blur the noise because the noise down here is kind of soft. And the noise on the ladybug that I added is really contrasty and harsh. We can just adjust the opacity of it a little bit or a lot bit, to change that. And like I said, let me just add some blur because it's going to bug me too much if I don't. So we'll add a little bit of blur. Doing this non-destructively is going to be the smart way to go. I'm not working non-destructively right now. I'm doing it in a kind of a dumb way, just for the sake of not going too slow. But there we go. We've got some blur on a noise. It's too much. It doesn't really match, but that's okay. At least it takes away some of the sharp, crisp 3D nature of that ladybug compared to where we were before. See before and after. All right, anyway, let's keep going. So back into our smart object. So I'm going to click on this tab over here. So we're inside of our ladybug smart object. And what else do we need to do? There's a few things. One is the contrast. I keep mentioning that. If we look at our image on the left, let me zoom out. Do you see any actual blacks in this image? Or, I mean, there's some whites up here, but I think even those whites are not pure white. Let me get my eyedropper tool out, sample that. Yeah, that's white. Some of the darkest areas of this image are like down here, and they're even kind of, not super dark or black. So I'm just sampling and kind of looking around at the tones in here, and there's not a lot of real black areas. Okay, couple, but I don't think it really matches on the ladybug. So I'm going to look back over inside of my smart object and see what we can do about that. So going down through these, we've got one that's called lighting. And let me solo that or turn it on all by itself with that curves. So this is the effect of lighting on here. Okay, it's not the object, it's not the reflection, it's not the shininess, just lighting. Okay, so where do we want to add lighting? Do we want to change anything about the lighting? Do we want to make it brighter? I don't think brighter is it. I think we probably want to make it darker, if anything. But in the hopes of making this thing kind of match the scene a little better, I'm going to try actually just brightening up the shadows with, you guessed it, curves. And so in that curves, again, let's clip it to just that layer. And we can grab the black point and drag it up, and you see how the blacks get brighter, right? We can drag this down so we don't do too much. It's obviously like way overboard, but let me just hit save. I guess we need to turn everything else back on so we see it together. So there's really like no black point in this anymore. It's very, very gray because I went way overboard with this, but let me go back down a little bit. Hit save. And over here on the left, see how it kind of changes the contrast in this quite a bit. We can change the white point too, and so on, but we're getting kind of closer. And I know I said I wasn't going to try to match this to the scene, but I can't help it. It's just all the different things that you can do. Think of changing colors of things. Now, if we wanted to actually change the color of this ladybug, how do you guys think we would do that? Let's look at what we have. So what's in the base layer? Let's turn that one on by itself. Turn the curves on. You can see that the color information really is kind of a lot of what's in here in the base layer. The lighting layer has some too, obviously, but this is our base layer. Let me try adding an adjustment on that. Let's just do a hue saturation. And if we clip that, we don't really need to technically because it's on the bottom of the stack, but I'm just going to change the hue to be a little purple. Let's turn on our other layers. Okay, so our lighting is going to be kind of affected still by this. I mean, it's going to bring in a little bit of that, but if I hit save, you see that it changes over here on the left. You know, on and on. This is all part of the process, just building things up. So there are other AOVs or beauty passes, different layers that 3D software can put out. AOV stands for arbitrary output value, just in case you're curious why I keep saying that. If we close up the subject layers, you see that there's also a depth group. And if I turn that on, turn this off, you don't see anything because there's a mask on it and the thing inside of it is hidden. You can barely see that a little bit. I'm going to alt click on the mask so you can see a little better. Zoom out. But you see that there are things that are closer are brighter, things that are further away are darker, because again, this was designed in 3D programs, and 3D programs, they have depth, not just horizontal and vertical columns of pixels. There's a depth information there as well. So the 3D software can render an AOV, an arbitrary output value or a beauty pass that includes depth. And that's what this is, this atmosphere thing. We can use this to add fog or haze to an image. I'm not going to actually use it that way in this image. I'm going to turn this stuff back on. But if we go into our channels, you can see that we have depth, Z depth right there. So the Z depth is a mask that not a mask, but it's a channel that we can use to do different things, like combine with the lens blur filter to add some blur that's automatically going to blur things that are further away more than things that are closer. And that is going to replicate the effect of depth of field. So in the photo on the left, you can see that the mushroom is in focus right around here and on the stem. The leaves are in focus here on the ground, but up close, they're blurry, and out on the back, everything's super, super blurry, right? So if we look at our ladybug, do you see how sharp and crisp the focus is on the back leg? But on the mushroom, it may not actually be that sharp and crisp. The very front of the mushroom is just a blurry mess because it's closer to the camera, and yet the things that are in that plane are sharp and crisp because the 3D object is 100% sharp and crisp and everything's in focus. So we want to kind of tweak that a little bit, maybe. I'm going to show you kind of how that works. With your channels, make sure you always click back on RGB before you leave the channels panel. Otherwise, you're going to be messing with stuff that you don't want to mess with. All right, let's turn this off. And In order for this to work, this is a little tricky, okay? So we can't do a lens blur on a group. We can't do it on a smart object. We have to do it on just a pixel layer, okay? So we know how to make a pixel layer that's somewhat non-destructive, right? Let's say that I'm done. I definitely don't do this until you're finished with all the other compositing and blending and adjusting stuff that you're going to do inside the subject layers. If you do it before that, you're just going to go back and start over again with some of that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and just um, stamp visible. Remember this keyboard shortcut? Command Alt Shift E, Control Alt Shift E, Command Option Shift E. So whatever your keyboard layout is, there we go. So I've got my layer one here. I can turn this off. And this by itself is just a pixel layer. And that's all it is, right? So layer one, this I'm going to name it so I don't forget what that's for. Stamp visible for blur. I'm going to say what it's for. Okay, and then I'm going to go to my filter menu and blur, lens blur. And in here, I can choose in my lens blur how I want it to blur. I want it to blur with a depth mask. And all the masks that are in there, the alpha channels are there. Z depth is the one I'm looking for. And I can set the focal point in the image. Let's say I want it to be focused. Oops. Did I deselect that? There we go. Select the focal point. Let's say right there. I don't know if you can tell that it got sharper, and the stuff that's further away got blurrier. Then we can change the distance. It can be a little slow. We can change the radius. See, this stuff back here got extra blurry, and this is right here is pretty sharp. I'm going to change that focus to right there maybe. So the face gets a little out of focus. I think this is probably in line. The hard part with this is we can't really see what's going on underneath it, the layer. So that's okay. Hit OK. It's going to apply that, hit save, and it'll change those over here to where now our blur is taking effect on this. Now the edges get a little bit weird, and that's because maybe, let's see. Do we have a mask on that? No, we don't. If you put the blur inside of this subject layer stack, then this mask, this layer mask, see how crisp and sharp it is? It'll leave you with really crisp edges, even though you've blurred the internal details and it'll look really weird. So just make sure that if you do this blur thing, it is a destructive change. Put it outside of your stack, do it as a stamp visible. If you decide afterwards, oh, maybe I want to change the color back, then basically you're just going to throw this stamp visible layer away, delete it, turn it off, whatever. Go back in here, make your changes in this stack again, and then do another stamp visible, put it outside of the subject layers group, outside of any masks or anything, and then apply your lens blur. Okay, if you want to have a way to tweak the amount of blur or the amount of depth in the image, then let's look at that. So we've got our Z depth here. And this channel, like I said before, things that are close in this case are darker. Things that are further away are lighter. So light gray or white is very far away or very out of focus. And things that are close to the 3D camera are darker. If we want to increase that or change that, we can hit Control I or Command I to invert it. And I'm going to do that just for now because I think it's a little easier to see the effect. And we can also apply changes to this with adjustments. So this is the one and only time that you're going to use adjustment layers. I'm sorry, you're not going to use adjustment layers for this because adjustment layers, they're non-destructive, right? We want to always use those whenever we can. And you learned before, don't do actual adjustments because they are destructive. Well, we can't do adjustment layers in the channels panel. So instead, let me undo this just so we're doing it properly. There's my original Z depth. I'm going to drag this down onto the new channel button, just like the new layer button. So I got Z depth copy, and I probably should rename that, but I'm just going to leave it alone right now. I'll invert this one, and then I'm going to hit Control L for levels. And this is a destructive change, but I want to brighten things up and darken them down. So I'm increasing the contrast. So if we look at the before and after, it's really making things stand out. Things that are close get even brighter, things that are further get even darker. So this is going to allow us to have even more of an atmospheric effect or even more of a depth effect with those blur filters and things that we're doing. So your mileage may vary. It just depends what you're trying to achieve, but we can, shift this more this way, or we can take the whole thing over this way a little bit. So we have really fine-tuned control over that. It's just once we hit OK, it's going to actually apply those to this Z-depth copy layer. So that's kind of permanent. So that's why it's important to make a copy. Don't wreck your Z-depth because you only get one of those. Now, again, if I went and did the whole thing again where I took a stamp visible layer and I applied lens blur to it, I could choose to apply the lens blur to the Z depth layer or to the Z depth copy channel, I should say, not layer, channel. Okay, lots of information here. Don't look at my results as what you should emulate. Hopefully, you're looking at just the tools that I used and showed you how to jump into those layers, and some of that hopefully made some sense. And you can start to see like what you might want to do in order to make this ladybug match the scene the best possible. Okay. If I see you guys adding red reflections or red shine to this, I'll know that you just copied my video and didn't do it yourself. So I'll be watching for that. Okay. But have fun with this one. It's a cool way to work, I think. I know probably a lot of you aren't super deep into the 3D workflows, and that's okay. If you're going to be working a lot in Photoshop, at some point you might work with folks who do have the 3D pipeline, and you're going to be the end of that pipeline where you're going to be taking their outputs, a 32-bit or 16-bit PSD with AOVs bundled as a smart object. You're going to be compositing that into scenes or advertising photos and so on. So, good skills to have, and it's going to prep you a little bit for Tech Project 9, where you will actually be doing some really basic 3D work and bringing that into Photoshop as well. So I'll do a video for that one next.